This village house generated 100 blocks in the sky, and this seed gets you full netherite armor in under 2 minutes. And these are just some of the 31 rarest structure overlaps that you're about to see. Starting with a structure so big, it couldn't even fit within this mountain range. Since if you look inside, you find this seed generated not 1, not 2, but 4 different villages all within the same area. Stranger still is that all of these villages are the plains variant, even when they're covered with snow on top. And there's a huge height difference between these. Some houses generate right up at the top of the walls, others are down here in the valley. And that plains village is rare, but it doesn't look nearly as out of place as this one that we found in the swamp. Since, because of a tiny sliver of plains biome that generated inside of this swamp, that was all it took for a whole plains village to generate perfectly inside of the swamp biome. Which answers a burning question that's been in my mind this whole time. If villagers were to naturally generate inside of a swamp, do they become swamp villagers? Unfortunately, looking around, the answer's no. However, if you were to go and breed any of these villagers together, then their offspring would take up the swamp villager cloak. Really, the closest thing we have to a natural swamp villager is the witch hut that generated over here, which seems like it would be a big problem for our villagers, but witches don't attack villagers like other illagers do, making for the most awkward throuple I've seen. Well, second. Swamp villagers aren't the only clickbait that we're testing though. Since if we were to dive into this village here, we'll see that it perfectly overlaps with the cherry grove biome. And I've seen enough YouTube thumbnails that'll try to get you to believe that cherry villagers exist. But not only did only the plains villager types generate, but if you scroll through the game's data, there's no cherry grove villagers that exist. There is a resource pack though. Even without it, this cherry village is still one of the most beautiful things you can find in naturally generated Minecraft. But beauty isn't everything. This village is literally on fire. Since this seed generated a massive sinkhole, sinking down all the way from water level to deep slate. But then if you look inside of the lava, you'll notice that this village is actually still standing, just not for long. But as the fire spreads across most of the village, it is funny that the water pouring in from the top actually keeps some of it cool. I can't imagine any of it's good for the village's property, but any excuse to live is good enough for me. And why did this village generate all the way down here anyway? Well, if you look at this floating bridge left up on the top, it would seem like this part of the village wanted to generate first, but when it couldn't find a floor, it decided to go all the way down to the bottom of the sinkhole, which sinkholes are caused by a factor in Minecraft called weirdness value. It's not something you're noticing very often in F3, but if you look in the debug menu, you can find this statistic. And the results of when weirdness gets really weird is pretty insane to see. The Minecraft at Home Discord even has a whole contest of trying to find the highest weirdness value that they can find, with M33 Galaxy finding a new weirdness record of 23,517. That village sank to bedrock, but the next one did the opposite. It's up in the clouds. When you spawn in, you won't find much, just a singular village church, a golem, and the fact that you're 200 blocks above the ground. No other village houses even generated close to this. It's just a singular monastery. But it begs the next question, how do you get off of this thing? Well, even without 9 lives like this cat, luckily there's a singular waterfall that generated right off the side of this so that we can jump off and land safely to the bottom, which is a solid out if you get sick of the whole inner peace thing. Still a better church than this village priest had. Because while most of the village generated just fine right over here on the outside, if you step underneath this cliff, you find a village church perfectly embedded into the rock face of the cliff. Even climbing up the ladder doesn't let us fully get up to the top. Okay, fine, let's excavate it for him. That's not much of an improvement, but use it in good health. So how do these collisions happen anyway? The reason we see a lot of overlap is because Minecraft places its structures independently of one another. So the random number generator that decides to place down this village does not talk to the one that places down this jungle temple, which caused this seed here, where we see a desert village literally merging inside of the jungle temple. And you can tell it's clearly not intentional because all of the doors are sealed off in the worst way possible too, even trapping this villager inside of the temple inside of its own house. What's more impressive to me is how 3 different beds generated inside of the jungle temple, but not a single one of them turned into a half bed, which is just more proof for how rare half beds can be. But with 2 diamonds generating down here in the jungle temple chest, it's worth breaking a couple of villagers' doors just to go and get the loot. Speaking of loot, you know what's rarer than finding an enchanted golden apple inside of a desert pyramid? Finding that loot chest inside of a desert pyramid that's inside of a jungle temple too. Oh, and the whole thing's at spawn as well. But just when you thought the jungle temple and desert pyramid were making a cute couple, the jungle pyramid goes and cheats on it with woodland mansion. Speaking of woodland mansions, pop quiz. What 2 mobs do pillagers hate? We got the villagers and we got the creaking. And so a village that starts in a pale garden and then crops over inside of the woodland mansion, leaving villager houses inside as well, that's probably their worst nightmare. Because even though woodland mansions are allowed to generate inside of pale gardens, villagers are never supposed to spawn in this other biome. And while I was exploring this seed, I couldn't help but feel like I was inside of a horror movie. You see it too, right? And from a horror movie to a comedy, we have this hilarious sight of a spider drowning underneath the floorboards of a woodland mansion. All because because this ocean monument decided to generate down here in the sinkhole. And the ocean monument's worth talking about too, because it couldn't find the floor of where it's supposed to generate, and so when it reached past its limit of how deep it thought the seafloor was, the prismarine legs started to stretch even longer all the way down into the deep slate level. But oh, thank goodness the crop farm survived. I just wouldn't want to harvest those crops if you get yourself the Mining Fatigue 3. We've seen pyramids, temples, and mansions all colliding with each other. What happens if we collide with the stronghold, the one that we actually need to beat the game? Unlike other structures, strongholds can only generate 128 per world in Java. That means in this whole 60 million by 60 million world that we have in Minecraft, strongholds only cover 0.0000036% of the entire world area, making the chances of this stronghold overlapping a desert temple even rarer. On the outside, this is just a normal desert temple, but when you go inside to look for the TNT trap room, instead you're going to be greeted by an exposed part of the stronghold staircase. And if that wasn't exposed enough for you, don't worry, we're going to set off the TNT trap too. What's funny to me is that when we find one of these rare structures, how often they actually have an enchanted golden apple inside of their chests as well. Just the structure alone isn't rare enough, the world has decided to make it even rarer for us. And even though the trap pit was cut off in part by some of this stronghold corridor, all the chests and the TNT generated just fine. That's a rare stronghold, but this is a rare end portal find. Since here we have one of the deep slate diamond fossils generating perfectly on top of our end stronghold portal. And yet, even covered up in all the bone blocks, our end portal still doesn't break. But before you break all the bone blocks to go to the end, you should actually go and collect all the diamonds here too. Since with a Fortune 3 pickaxe, I was able to get 32 diamonds right before I went over to the end. Enough for a full set of diamond armor and the tools to help you kill the dragon. But if you want to beat the game even faster, then you should use this C. Since here, the end portal generated in the exact same chunk as where we spawn. Now, I know what you might be asking, how are you going to get to the nether? Well, if we were to collect our iron into buckets, then we could use the lava that generates inside of the portal to actually make ourselves a nether portal structure. And then, as the original poster apenballetje says, we could use a fishing rod to bring the blazes close enough so that we kill them for the rods. But even with Eyes of Ender, you're not going to beat the game with this portal. Look, I know I said end portals are indestructible, and usually that's true, which makes this mineshaft in Bedrock even stranger. With this part of the mineshaft hallway cutting perfectly through the end portal room, removing all of the lava and most of the end portal frames. And unfortunately, it didn't pre-generate a working portal like this seed has in the past. And that's not the only way that it ruined this stronghold, since we also got this half door over here hiding inside of the world. Hey, it still works. More than you can say for the portal. These 4 blaze spawners generated right next to each other. And what's even crazier is that this happens millions of blocks away from spawn. And because blazes are able to spawn mid-air, this quickly becomes one of the most powerful blaze farms, and it happened naturally. And it's a crazy situation for this to even happen, since the way that our nether fortresses generate are made out of different jigsaw puzzle pieces. And normally it's only weighted so that we're going to get a few of these per structure, but there's nothing preventing multiple from happening. But even with all the blaze rods in the world, it won't matter with this end portal. This stronghold hit the 1 in 1 trillion chance of giving us a full Eye of Ender portal, but then it got even rarer. Since because of the way that Minecraft generates different features like lava pools, if you were to step into the world and generate this after the stronghold, then the stone blocks from the lava pool overwrite the end portal frames. But the portal still functions, letting us go to the end if we don't accidentally fall in lava. And a way to confirm how rare this is that if you were to TP to just slightly different coordinates, as Rovant shows off, then the room would generate as normal. We were just a few blocks away from the stone portal never happening. That's what I think is so cool. And speaking about a rare stronghold, what's the absolute rarest stronghold seed you can find? Since if it's a 1 in 1 trillion chance of just one portal having all 12 eyes filled, could all 128 strongholds in a single world be complete? Theoretically, yeah. But to put that in perspective, you would have to search more seeds than the number of atoms in the observable universe to find this, with the formal name being a 1 in with a formal number being a 1 in 1 undesequingentillion chance. Nope, that's not gibberish. It's the Conway Wexler naming system, which yes, I did have to look up. This single house generated right down here in the lush cave. In such a perfect setting, it looks like I built it for this video. I'm just kidding. This is much better than anything I could build. At least if you load this seed in 1.18. Since trying to look at this now would just give you the regular house down here in the deep slate. And while this might look like the loneliest house that you could possibly find in Minecraft, it is worth noting that the rest of the village generated generated down here in the lower parts of the deep slate. Not nearly as cinematic, but also not as lonely. Here we have a monster room that generated above ground. It actually fits so well, I would think that it was intentional if it didn't break down these trees. And actually it makes for one of the safest spawning rooms because it doesn't allow mobs to spawn until it goes to nighttime. And if that wasn't already weird, we also have 2 chests back to back like so, as opposed to the original generation of having them splayed off on different corners. And from exposed dungeons to exposed strongholds, we have this library that generated right out into the open. And not just one of them, but 2. You don't even need an Eye of Ender to tell you where this structure is, it's fairly obvious. But finding the portal's a bit tougher. That is, unless you go for a swim, since breaking down these iron bars, you can swim directly into the end portal room to beat the game. And speaking of floating structures, it's hard not to mention these 4 different desert temples that generated on their own islands, turning the ocean into a veritable treasure trove. And in case you're wondering which one of these desert temples has the best loot, don't worry, I went through and searched all of them and placed them each into a different copper chest. And shockingly, Weathered was the best one. Most of that has to do with the fact that it generated ocean ruins inside of this place as well, giving 2 more chests inside of the temple. While that treasure was buried, this one's hard to miss. We should look at this igloo, which didn't just generate away from the snow, but it generated hundreds of blocks from the ground. You need an elytra just to fly up to this place. And funnier still is that we got the whole basement as well. And don't ask me how you get down the villager after you cure it. I think he's on his own at this point. And staring at the clouds, we've got the tallest witch hut I've ever seen, which considering the witch huts we've shown off in the past, that's really saying something. That is 107 blocks tall. What happened here is that it tried to generate with the swamp like it normally does, but because of the windswept savanna's tall elevation, our swamp biome got lifted up into the stratosphere, and our witch hut was left wondering where it needs to go. And there's a ruined portal right next to it just in case you want to burn it down. And from our highest spawn point to our lowest, this seed generates you at Y level -30. The only things we have to see are Skulk and a mine shaft up above. Unfortunately, there's no easy way to scale up to go and get those wood planks. Otherwise, we'd have plenty of ores to go and mine down here, just as long as we're not too loud next to the deep dark. This is the tallest village I've ever seen. Normally, we see woodland mansions and pillager outposts being the tall ones. And so the only reason we see something like this is thanks to 1.12.2 special world generation. But ever since caves and cliffs, our villages really don't like to generate in these kinds of ways. It's nice to go back and look at the old seeds and see that it's not just the new generation that's gotten weird. Our villager houses have been getting wrecked for years. And while we've mostly looked at seeds that are rare because of where they generated, these structures are so hard to find because of what spawned inside of them. Like this igloo here, which happened to lose half of its bed after the village generated a lamppost inside of it. And that's not the only weird generation that we see here, since something I've never seen before is a carpet generating on top of a pathland block. But because the igloo generated first and then the village underneath it, we not only get a very misshapen igloo, but also a comparison next to the other igloos that generate inside of the tundra villages. I guess I never noticed the difference until now. What I did notice was off though was this spawner inside of the trial chamber. Since even though we have a spider face that's adorned on the wall of the trial chamber, I don't think seeing one of these spawners out in the open was what they had in mind. And because of the lighting in here, we actually don't get any mob spawns from the spawner either. In fairness, it was only ever built with trial spawners planned. But because of this mine shaft that overlaid on top of this, we got this weird spawner block and a chest minecart that we can find inside of the walls. Well, that spawner looks out of place. This one looks right at home. Since if we open up this door into the trial chamber, instead of the regular rooms that we're used to, we find that it opens perfectly inside of a monster room, giving us a strangely fitting hybrid structure. It's just not going to be the most rewarding if you go and try to flee in here if you're getting chased by the other mobs. This ruined portal isn't special, at least not if you just look at the overworld version. But if you go over into the nether, you'll see that there's a comparison here that makes the exact same loot in the exact same spot in the exact same chest positions. Literally, these portals mirror each other across the dimensions. And the lore implications of just this alone, I think is really neat. It'd be even cooler if some of the overworld grass blocks were coming over on the ruined portal on the nether side. And it's not the only thing we can find out of place in the water, since normally mushroom fields biomes aren't supposed to generate any kind of hostile mobs. But because this mushroom fields biome was so large, it generated a whole ocean monument inside of the lake. Meaning if you were to go and bring one of your mushrooms over for a swim, you'd get a jump scare I don't even think mushroom stew could fix. I'll be honest with you, this structure isn't rare. Wait, so why is it so far in the video? Well, the dungeon room itself isn't actually the rare part, but what's so special is because of exactly where it generated. Not only is the spawner completely covered up with skulk, but deep inside of the ground, it lies hidden underneath the belly of the beast. Since on the face of the erosion that caused the deep dark is a monster's face carved into the cliffside. And add on to that this fact: traditional seed finding tools aren't made to go and find faces like this. That's a behavior that they call pareidolia. It's not made to look like a face, our human minds just see it as one because we're used to that. And something subjective like that doesn't blend well with the objectivity of seed finding, which means finding something like this this has to happen naturally. And to me, that's so much cooler. Just not as cool as this seed. On this seed in 1.17.1, you're able to generate in next to a ruined portal, and within 1 minute and 18 seconds, have yourself full netherite armor. Here's how we do it. So because the ruined portal didn't generate with any kind of crying obsidian inside of the structure, we can grab the remaining obsidian from the chest and then take the enchanted golden pickaxe to go and use to get netherrack. We'll need the blocks for later. And then heading over, we generate perfectly next to a bastion remnant. And even better for us, this is a treasure bastion. So if we use our blocks to get down into the lava layer, avoiding all the piglin brutes that we can, and loot our first chest to get ourselves diamond leggings and a helmet. And now the rest of our netherite lies on the side of the other bastion. Because the incredibly rare thing here is that we didn't just get one treasure bastion, we got two back to back. Which normally doesn't happen because these generate in differing quadrants. But no time to worry about that now, since we need to go and break this magma cube spawner, otherwise we might find ourselves dead with all of our new loot. And then we'll have dug over to get ourselves the chest plate and boots remaining, and then use the iron that we've picked up from the blocks to make a smithing table and have ourselves a full set of netherite armor. A speedrun's so perfect, the only thing that could ruin it is the netherite upgrade changes. And with that, folks, YouTube thinks that you might like this video, so see if they're right and have a good one, alright?